Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to Century Tech Foundation's Community-Based Solutions to Digital Advancement event. I'm going to ask for some assistance from my team to please move us along in the slide deck. And if you aren't already, I invite you to identify yourselves in the chat. Let us know who you are, where you're from, what organization you are with. We are very excited to have you all with us today. We are here to share with you some of the early insights and findings from our work with 5 community-based organizations in 5 cities that are focused on digital equity and that are innovating their programs to connect people to opportunities, primarily via workforce development. And to open up our conversation, we have invited a very special guest to deliver some opening remarks to you. I'd like to introduce you to Director Angela T. Bennett from NTIA. She is the Director of Digital Equity, the agency's first ever digital equity director, who is a longtime champion of the issues that we are all here to discuss and learn more about. And she and all her colleagues at NTIA are working tirelessly to move some historic opportunities for communities around the country to expand digital access and adoption. And I'm very excited and very honored that she is here to speak with us today. So welcome, Angela.
Thank you so much, Marta. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to join you today. As Marta mentioned, my name is Angela T. Bennett, and I'm the Digital Equity Director for NTIA, and I'm so excited to be here with you. The COVID-19 pandemic shed light on what many Americans already knew. Access to the internet is a necessity for everyday life, but too many Americans in our communities are without access to affordable, reliable, high-speed internet. And the people here on this Zoom know that all the speed in the world is irrelevant for the people lacking the skills to use the internet or connected device to access it. We all know that every single person is at a different point in their journey to becoming a digital citizen, and our hope is to meet them where they are and to provide the tools to help get them there. Under the Biden-Harris administration, the Internet for All initiative will meaningfully address the fundamental economic, educational, social, and health-related inequities in our country by connecting Americans and closing the digital divide. And local engagement is key for developing inclusive solutions that connect the members of our communities who have been left out and left behind for far too long. As Marta shared, through my previous work in serving communities, I know how critical those relationships are for ensuring that historically marginalized communities are included in planning conversations, particularly communities of color, rural communities, and older Americans. So when we talk about local engagement, we're not talking about the check the box engagement. We're not even just talking about helping the community get a seat at the planning table in type of engagement, but we're talking about going to the community's planning table and asking them, how can we show up and hold space to support them in achieving their dreams so they can thrive? It's about recognizing, acknowledging, and valuing the strengths of our community in spite of the challenges it faces, because we are strong, we are resilient. If you look at my signature on my emails, it says, we're the change we've been waiting for, because we are. We just need a chance and access to the resources to make it happen. That's why I am so enthusiastic about the work that you all are doing to empower and support our communities. And I'm anxious to listen and learn about your amazing work and learn how I can be supportive. In closing, I am super excited about the work that we will all do together and for the transformational impact on our communities, our states, our nation, and Americans everywhere. Thank you all for the work that you have done and will continue to do to help make the lives of every American better. And thank you so much for allowing me to be here with you today. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Marta.
Thank you so much, Angela. It's really great to have you here today. And your quote there, it just really spoke to me. There's a song by Sweet Honey in the Rock that goes along those lines of we are the ones we've been waiting for. And I think everyone who's here today, who's presenting on behalf of their organizations, is going to demonstrate to you the efforts that they are making to really deliver on the promise of what your work is about at NTIA and to connect communities to greater opportunity. I'd like to take a minute before Colin speaks, and this is Dr. Colin Rhinesmith, to just set up for everyone the context of our gathering here today and what we are speaking to. About 5 months ago, Century Tech Foundation issued a number of small grants to 5 community development organizations to support innovation in their work. These are organizations that might first identify as digital equity organizations, or they might not, but they have all come to a common place of recognizing the critical role of digital access and adoption as a means to connect people to economic opportunity, which really speaks to what we believe at Century Tech Foundation, which is in our mission of promoting digital advancement, something which we see as a civil right. And what we define digital advancement is really it's an approach that seeks to leverage investments in technology access and adoption to help build a more inclusive digital economy. So it's the what follows when you have broadband infrastructure and when you have programs that promote adoption and skills building. How do we truly enable folks to pursue their aspirations and to build more shared prosperity? So we issued these grants to 5 organizations. You will hear from their executive directors and program leads today. We're moving into some slides here, so let's skip ahead 2 slides so you can see who these organizations are. We have the next slide, please. Okay, next slide. And we've got with us today from Detroit, Michigan, the Equitable Internet Initiative. From the Bronx in New York City, we have Lyft New York. From the metropolitan area in Boston, we have the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. From Philadelphia at Drexel University, we have the Excite Center and their Digital Navigators program. And from here in Washington, D.C., where I am, we also have Bite Back. And they are all a fabulous group of organizations doing really, really important and hard work to make good on the promise of universal access. So let's, we can come out of the slides again. Thank you. I invite you all following today's presentation to reach out to us and learn more about Century Tech Foundation. I don't want to take up time in our event with that. I really do want to focus on these groups, these organizations and individuals who are working day to day on what we see as really important contributions. And you will hear about a range of models. You will hear about 2-generation models. You will hear about work with public housing agencies working in collaboration with one another across jurisdictions. You will hear about support for parents, partnerships with universities, and collaborations with community-based organizations. So really, really powerful models. And I'm excited to introduce you to Dr. Colin Rhinesmith, who we invited into this project with us. We wanted to be able to have a sense of what the value was of our investment in these organizations. We are approaching this as a learning experience as for us at Century Tech Foundation, because we want to know what works and where the opportunities are and where the barriers are, because we'd like to think about how we help other organizations on board to this type, these types of efforts. So we invited Colin to do a qualitative assessment. And that would be both of value to us at Century Tech Foundation, but also to the grantees, the cohort of digital integrators programs, so that we could think about evaluation in the context of this work. And I will put a note on this to say, I think this is very important. At the end of the day, how we measure digital equity and how we measure the impact of investments in digital access and adoption is really important. We don't have equal and shared definitions across practitioners. And it's something that, you know, folks don't always have the capacity, whether it's the human capacity or the financial resources, to do quality studies of their work. So we also think that this is an important element to discuss in how to better support efforts on the ground. With that, I will turn it over to Colin, and he can set up for you his presentation. Thanks for being with us today, Colin.
Thank you so much, Marta. Hello, everyone. I have to say before things get more spotty, I am in the mountains of Vermont, where internet access is not quite fully as robust as it should be. So if I get cut off, I apologize. And two, if I stop my video, hopefully you can pay attention to the slides and not worry about my face on the screen. So with that, again, it's such a pleasure to be with you all. Again, my name is Colin Reinsmith. I'm the founder and director of the Digital Equity Research Center, which is a new research center at the Metropolitan New York Library Council. And next slide, please. The Digital Equity Research Center, as you can see here, engages in community-based and participatory digital equity research whenever possible to advance social, economic, and racial justice. We do that by really focusing on communities. That's why I'm so excited to be part of this event, so excited to be part of this opportunity to work with the amazing organizations who you're going to hear from today. And we do that really by listening deeply with and in communities most impacted by digital inequalities. Next slide, please. So as you can see here, there were two primary goals to the evaluation. The first being to design and implement an impact measurement framework to evaluate the Digital Integrators pilot program over this short time, but in a way that could be useful both to the Century Tech Foundation and the organizations involved in the pilot, but also to be able to use the framework for evaluation to identify opportunities for scale and to provide the digital integrator partners with qualitative analysis about their work. Next slide, please. So there were several areas when we set out, and I really appreciate the collaborative ways in which we've been able to work together, both on the evaluation as well as closely with the organizations involved in the pilot program. You can see a number of areas here that the Century Tech Foundation was interested in, understanding not just the ways in which the funding and resources were able to support the digital integrators over these past several months, but also understanding things like the cohort experience. What is the value of having a cohort experience that really provides, I think what we found together, working together with the digital integrators, opportunities for ongoing sharing, lessons learned in process rather than simply waiting till the end to learn impacts and best practices. But there were also several areas related to the context for implementation, related to demographics, both of the, primarily of the demographics of that the organization serve, as well as the ways in which the digital integrators worked on, through their programs, removing barriers to access and adoption. The other area that I was really excited to dig into, which connects to my own work as well, is really understanding how conceptions of equity, justice, and inclusion relate to and help shape the goals of this work with and in communities. Of course, understanding how all of this impacts efforts to promote workforce development, where technology training and coaching is involved. Next slide, please. So there were several research questions that we were interested in asking to help guide the evaluation research. Two of them are here, which are, how are digital integrators leveraging existing programs to promote digital advancement in and with their communities? Also, how might the Digital Integrators Pilot Program foster innovation within motivated digital equity community organizations? And there's sort of an overarching question around the role of philanthropy in supporting digital equity work, which was, of course, incredibly important at this time as states are ramping up their digital equity plans, of course. What role can philanthropy play? Next slide, please. As a way to understand and really look at what was happening in these ways and understanding what digital advancement looks like and how it's promoted by all of the digital integrators, leveraged a framework called digital equity ecosystems, which I've really looked at over the past several years, focusing on these important interactions. And I'm going to stop my video because I'm getting a message. Important interactions between individuals, populations, communities, and their larger environments that often involve social and technical factors that all play a role in shaping the work to advance more equitable access to technology, but also addressing the underlying structural inequalities that shape and impact the work. Next slide, please. So I was so excited when about a year ago or so, a group of students from Columbia University working with folks at in New York that really put together this wonderful visualization of what exactly we mean by digital equity ecosystems. And it's oftentimes folks that are made up of representative of organizations and communities, but also could be internet service providers, businesses, but also the individuals who often from the ground up in a grassroots and collaborative and community way, all work together to promote more healthy digital equity ecosystems. And this is a link to their wonderful report. Next slide, please. So getting closer to the findings, we're really in the preliminary analysis stage of this work, where we've been able to interview all of the wonderful individuals who are on the call today, gave their time. We're really appreciative of that to understand their work with their communities. 3 key areas rose in this work, looking at workforce development, project design, and evaluation in particular, which, as you can see from the overall areas of interest, were 3 key areas that we are particularly looking at right now. Next slide, please. So one of the things that I want to present today is when, I was so excited to see that the Century Tech Foundations frame this as community-based solutions for digital advancement. And what I want to do now is to kind of really explain sort of what I'm finding, what that actually means. What does that look like? How do we break down and sort of articulate and operationalize these different areas? So one of the key takeaways from this work so far is that meaningful community engagement, intentional community partnerships, and strong community relationships are key to achieving digital advancement. Next slide, please. Now, what do we mean by this? So by meaningful community engagement, you can see here that the definition might be that community-based organizations like the digital integrators truly center community members in the design, implementation, and evaluation of their programs to ensure their needs and aspirations are not only considered, but are met as well. Next slide, please. So by intentional community partnerships, again, it's listening deeply to the needs and aspirations of their partners, of their community partners involved in the ecosystems that support this work, but doing so in ways that develop mutually beneficial partnerships that advance common goals. I think oftentimes we talk about and we hear about partnerships in this work, public-private partnerships, other partnerships, but what does it mean to be intentional? What does it mean to be truly listen to those needs and aspirations of our community partners in a way that shapes the work towards common goals? Next slide, please. And then finally, that strong community relationships were another area that rose to the top in my conversations with all of the digital integrators in different ways. But here we might understand this as centering the entire person or the whole person in support of community members as they work together, as the community-based organizations with members and communities work closely together to achieve digital advancement. Next slide, please. So, and what we're really finding, I think, across all of these different evaluation areas is that really you can create several different matrices. You can find that meaningful community engagement, intentional community partnerships, and strong relationships really just is a huge sort of underlying, often, kind of, in the day-to-day or programmatic on paper, we might miss it. We might miss sort of the importance of things that are perhaps taken for granted in this work that all organizations know because they're in the trenches doing work. But as we have this incredible opportunity to speak across different audiences today, really operationalizing this again is really what we're hoping with this work we can elevate. And next slide, please. Okay, so just in the remaining slides that I have, I'm not going to go through all of this, but essentially what we're doing is really mapping out exactly what it looks like and how do these different factors sort of interact with each other. So for example, with Bite Back in this slide here, we see that community engagement was absolutely key in the development of their 2-gen model of digital skills training designed for primary caregivers and their children. And that the community partnerships, the partnership between Bite Back and Martha's Table in DC is just so critical. And we can even see that Martha's Table, centers community in their work in a way that is, visual and visible publicly through their website, but also in the development of the program. I think it was exciting in talking with Sharon, hearing how that not only listening to community partners shape the needs of the sort of inform the development of the program, but it actually, as she said, created the equivalent of family literacy in this, or family digital literacy, creating this sort of 2-gen model, which is really exciting. And then through each of these slides, I have sort of digital advancement, what I'm calling sample indicators, as a way that we might measure and understand the impact of the work. Next slide, please. The next slide with LIFT, we can see sort of operationalize or attempt to operationalize the role of community partnerships that are so key in their work. LIFT New York partners with Masters of Social Work programs. You can see the schools listed here. And that to provide Master of Social Work students both with field work opportunities, but also to provide member parents with coaching and wraparound support. Having social work students gain opportunities and bring social work skills to digital equity is just, as many of us know because we're either working in the field or have studied it, is so key to providing that social and community support. Next slide, please. And then finally, with the Equitable Internet Initiative in Detroit, we can see that actually across all of 3 of these areas, we can see different examples of how community partnerships, community engagement, but also the importance of community relationships. When I asked Janice Gates, the director of EII, who you will hear from, sort of how they think about their workforce development strategy, she responded to me by saying, we're really trying to think about the entire person. We don't just look at them as employees, but they are still from the neighborhood. And I think that, again, this is just a really wonderful sort of, example of how important it is to center community relationships in this work. And next slide, please. So finally, in the last 2 slides here, the second key takeaway is what's really clear based on previous research and digital equity ecosystems that I've had the opportunity for the Benton Institute, working with the Benton Institute for Broadband and Society, has published that digital advancement rooted in meaningful community development strategies that we've seen today truly promotes healthy digital equity ecosystems and is really key to the work, particularly where there are digital equity coalitions involved working together and other entities collaborating to promote digital equity. And last slide, please. And finally, centering digital advancement in this work in the way that's rooted in community-based solutions can truly help states to be more thoughtful and intentional, I believe, in identifying the barriers and measurable objectives in a way where co-design is centered with those most impacted by digital inequalities in the upcoming state digital equity planning. And I think that's it. Next slide, please. So we're really excited. I just want to say, and hopefully my internet in the mountains still here works enough to put my face back on the screen, just that it's really looking forward to digging in more deeply with the findings that we have, and in the coming months to produce a report with the Century Tech Foundation that really highlights all the amazing work of the organizations that you're going to hear about today. So thank you again for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Colin. Let's go up. Yeah, thank you. Excellent. Just want to note a couple of questions that popped up in the chat. So yes, Anita, we will be sharing these materials. We'll also be sharing a recording of the presentation and make that available at a later time. So we are happy to share. Can we keep Colin on the screen, please? Because I do want to take a minute or two to answer a question that came up from Dina from HUD, who's joined us today, Dina Lehman Kim, who said, when you mention community partners, are you referring to organizations or the end users or both? And this is a really important piece to address because it is important to the work and what you'll hear from the other presenters.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that both is the short answer. Community partner organizations was certainly a big part of the sort of both the ecosystem model as well as how the digital integrators talked about their work with other partners in the community. But of course, I think we have to, and many of the organizations that you'll hear from today certainly consider partners as community members or end users in communities. And that's why it's so important. And I think what we've heard is the centering of folks in community and how partnerships and relationships are developed to support this work. So thank you. Absolutely great question.
Thanks so much. And thanks again, Colin. We will do more Q&A throughout and especially at the end. Let's now pivot to our first panel, and you will hear from the leaders of the 5 Digital Integrators program partners. And so joining us for this will be Joe Paul from BiteBack, Janice Gates from the Equitable Internet Initiative, and we can start to come on screen. Also, Xiomara Romain from Lyft New York, Stephen Larrick, who's joining us from the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, and before I forget, the last one is Dr. Youngmoo Kim from the Excite Center at Drexel University in Philadelphia. We need 2 more folks to join us. Thank you all. Okay. We'll wait for Joe Paul to join. Okay, well, while he's getting back on screen, I'll just set this up. So we're going to take about 15 to 20 minutes. Thanks, Joe. For us to just have a conversation. And again, you see everyone's names and their organizations identified here. These are the 5 Digital Integrators program partners who have been working with us for the past 5 months to implement pilots in their communities. And we want to hear from you all today. Well, first, maybe we'll do a quick go round and have each of you share with us your how you talk about the connection in your work to digital equity. What is it about digital equity that is so important to you and the work you do? And we'll go ahead and I'll just go to who's on my screen here that I see next to me is Stephen Larrick from the Metropolitan Area Planning Council.
Thank you so much, Marta. So hi, everyone. My name is Stephen Larrick. I lead our digital team here at the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. And, I think one of the things that's unique about our organization compared to some of the other organizations here is that we are a regional planning agency. And so that means that we approach digital equity from that lens and from the point of view of planning. And I think in the planning profession, for such a long time, we've had norms around housing planning, transportation planning, and kind of how that's done, how that's incorporated into the visioning process of community planning. And a big goal for us is to elevate digital equity to that same level of norms of how our communities planning to support their citizens. And our work has been focused on both kind of starting with that vision. And so we've been involved in digital equity planning with some of our communities here in the greater Boston area, and particularly some of our highest need communities, but also putting some of that work into action through pilot projects to bring public access networks specifically to housing authority sites and other low and moderate income housing. And as I think we'll hear from all of our panelists, this work to bring the kind of the literal access of a network will not succeed. It cannot succeed, nor will that planning work and that visioning work succeed unless, as we would do with housing planning or transportation planning, we are really thoroughly coming to the table, not bringing folks to our table, but going to the table of folks in the community who are needed to make this work possible. And so, so thankful for Century Tech's support in actually making sure, we've been able to kind of incorporate stakeholder mapping, focus group surveys, sessions into some of the way that we're actually helping housing authorities procure public access networks and actually implement those in ways that kind of leave space for the conversations and the actual project work that needs to happen, not from a regional planning organization, but from the folks on the ground who've been doing this work for years.
Thanks so much.
Excited to be here and for the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. I think your comments are resonating with a lot of folks. It's not often that we hear of a regional planning council focused in on digital equity in the way that you all are. And I think it's an important example for others to be aware of. We'll hear more. There's a really exciting collaboration happening across 3 jurisdictions there that MAPC has been facilitating with housing authorities. And that's not another common thing we learn about. Xiomara, you are with LIFT New York. And, I don't think you would have said, hey, we're a digital equity organization, but talk to us about where those two, your mission of LIFT comes together with digital equity and how you see that as being so core to what you're trying to achieve.
That's right. Thank you, Martha, for the invite and the ability to be a part of this amazing panel of presenters. I think LIFT has worked with thousands of families to help break the cycle of poverty. Our approach is that we provide integrated financial education and employment coaching, along with direct cash payments to our families. Our program is unique in that we use trained coaches to really partner with parents to help build their well-being and financial strength. And so, when I think about who we're serving, and the concept of digital integrators and what we're hoping to achieve, I think about the demographics of our community. Of the 2,500 individuals that we will reach this year alone, 99% of them are people of color. Approximately 50% of them identify as Black. The other 50% identify as Latinx or Hispanic, and 93% of them are women. And when they come to LIFT, they have an average household income of about $14,000. And so there's a clear connection. The data really shows the income level and race are significant factors in really contributing to the digital divide, and the growing gap between people who have access to the internet and technology and the people who don't continues to widen. And so I think, for us as an organization whose mission is really about economic mobility and helping families advance, addressing this sort of equity gap when it comes to digital access was a no-brainer for us. We pivoted to a virtual coaching program in March of 2020 out of necessity during the pandemic. And at the same time, that's when we really learned about supports that our families needed. And it really opened our eyes to the sort of rampant problems that existed in the South Bronx, the lack of reliability, the lack of connectivity. 50% of Bronx residents, don't have access to reliable broadband, and mostly because it's unaffordable. And so we knew that, in order for us to achieve our very ambitious goals of breaking the cycle of poverty, we would need to really, really take a deeper look at the issue of digital access. And so our first instinct was to make sure that we provided our parents and our communities with equipment, hotspots, laptops, so that they could, help their kids get through virtual learning, so that they could apply for unemployment benefits, and they could access and schedule food pantry visits. But what we recognize in doing this work over the last 2 years is that more is going to be needed. I love what you said about sort of, broadband and connectivity being the first step in order to really ensure parity and to ensure equity. We're going to have to sort of look at the workforce development needs of our parents, especially as they work to achieve economic, career, and academic goals. So we see this as sort of just, the multi-pronged approach to addressing inequities and the intersectionality of the complexity of poverty.
Thank you so much, Samara. And I think that it's been remarkable to see how you all have been evolving in the time that we've been partnering with you all, and very excited for what's to come. I'm going to move next to Joe Paul from Bite Back. And Bite Back is a longtime organization in Washington, D.C. And Joe, I'd like to just invite you into this conversation and how, for an organization that, I remember 20 years ago plus working with Bite Back here in D.C. So you've been at this for a long time, but it's a new moment in this work in many ways, and would love to hear your perspective on that as the head of Bite Back.
Indeed. First, thank you, Marta, for your leadership, and thank you for Century Tech Foundation for this partnerships and the opportunity to advance our mission. Special recognition to Angela Tide-Bennett with NTIA. So folks, for the next 30 minutes, I'm going to share with you, no, I'm just kidding. I have a few moments from my comments and I'm going to keep them brief. But I'd be remiss if I didn't mention how we approach relationships at Bite Back and how we approach the future as we're talking about digital equity. There's an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And so it's really through partnerships like these that we're going to solve this global problem. And as Marta mentioned, Bite Back's been at this for 25 years this year. Special shout out to all of you. You're invited to our gala October 14th. But we've been fighting for this for 25 years, and we haven't been at it alone. We've been fighting on behalf of marginalized and under-resourced communities for 25 years. And I think that's what a lot of the panel members have in common. Our common denominator is that we're fighting on behalf of under-resourced, underrepresented, marginalized communities who need access to this beautiful world of technology. And we know the doors that can slam open with technology and through digital support. And so we're moving fastly into a world where artificial intelligence, robotics, machine learning, automation is going to take over a lot of people's jobs, millions and millions. And so we exist to close that digital divide by partnering with a lot of you, making sure folks have the right skills for the future of work. So again, thank you so much, Martha, for the opportunity to share a little bit about Bite Back, what we do, and how we change the world. Thank you.
Thank you, and happy anniversary to Bite Back. We'll move next to Janice Gates, who's in Detroit and is the director of the Equitable Internet Initiative, which you may have heard of. It's a wonderful example of many of the themes that Colin just highlighted. So Janice, you too, the EII has been in this work, and efforts have been underway in Detroit for a long time around promoting digital equity. Would love to hear how you're viewing the work right now.
Thank you, Marta. Appreciate you having us here and on this panel. I would say that our approach is really rooted in place as well as principles. We are, based in Detroit, which is a majority Black city, and our work is really rooted in the Detroit Digital Justice Coalition principles, that focus on access, participation, healthy communities, and ownership. When the pandemic first started in 2020, I know a lot of you saw Detroit in the news, and not for really good reasons. It was because the city was caught off guard. There were, I think, time like 40% of residents did not have access to the internet at home. 70% of the Detroit public school students had no internet connections at home, which made it really difficult for them when schools went virtual. You know, there are plenty of reasons for this. One of them, you know, primarily being unaffordability, especially in a city where at the time when the pandemic started, the median income was about $31,000. And all of the high speed, quality, affordable internet was really concentrated in Midtown and downtown Detroit, which has seen a lot of investment and economic development. And a lot of the corporate, well, what I would refer to as the more corporate ISPs really operated there, and the prices in the neighborhoods outside of there were really unaffordable for the residents. But, you know, in Detroit, you know, access to the internet has always been an issue. Up until I think 2019, Detroit was consistently at the top of NDIA's list of the most disconnected cities. Over the past few years, it has, you know, since dropped to, I think, you know, somewhere between, I think, 13 and 15. Also, you know, there's a history of redlining here that dates all the way back to the 1930s. And what we've noticed is that, you know, those same neighborhoods that were redlined then are also facing digital redlining now by ISPs. And the neighborhoods that we work in, they are racked with unemployment, high rates of poverty, and those all play a role when you don't have internet access. So the reason that we started, you know, the Equitable Internet Initiative was because we wanted to build deeper. We were already building mesh networks, but we wanted to build more efficient networks and connect more homes. We wanted to build with and not for the community. And then we wanted to really challenge this belief that just because you live in a certain neighborhood, that you can't have access to high speed quality internet. We really wanted to, you know, reduce that, you know, growing disparity in our neighborhoods, you know, especially those outside of downtown, because it was really making it impossible for, you know, residents outside of those areas to fully participate in digital spaces or, you know, other democratic processes, as well as accessing, you know, different resources that were really critical to their daily lives, especially in a city that's, you know, made up of Black and Brown residents.
Thank you, Janice. And I think, you know, the experience of EII is really speaks to a lot of why we speak to this approach of digital advancement, which we term also as a new mindset, right? It's this like pick a lane of an issue you care about, and you cannot achieve impact in that area without addressing digital equity. So whether it's democracy, whether it's maternal and childcare, whether it's K-12 education, voter participation, like whatever it is, it will not happen if we don't solve for this. And I think that becomes really clear in your example. And one note before we move to Dr. Kim, I want to note, you know, these are organizations in 5 cities. And you are hearing from the leaders of these organizations, like how there are acute gaps in access, and that notion, that myth, that the lack of access and connectivity exists only in rural America. You know, you're seeing it every day. And we think it's really important to lift that up, that even in urban areas, in cities, we still have numbers of people that cannot connect. So thank you for speaking to that. And with that, we'll move to Youngmoo. Thank you for being with us.
Oh, thank you, Marta, and to CentraTech for hosting this great conversation. So I'm Youngmoo Kim. I direct a research institute at Drexel University that's called the Excite Center, which is all about the intersection of technology and creativity. So Drexel is a large university in Philadelphia. We are an anchor institution, and we take that responsibility very, very seriously. Historically, Drexel has been known for technical innovation. We were the first university to require all our students to have a computer, a personal computer, the first to have Wi-Fi across our campus, which are things we now take for granted in higher education, right? They are absolute requirements for going to college. So at the same time, we are in an area, West Philadelphia, that has historically been underserved. Now, our university president, John Fry, committed us to being the most civically engaged university in the nation. And that was at his inauguration more than 10 years ago now. And we established new initiatives around university community partnerships to help start rebuilding trust. As some of you may be aware, historically, town gown, sort of academic and neighborhood projects have not been partnerships, right? A lot of times it is, universities sort of dictating, oh, this is what we think should happen. And so that has led to decades of mistrust and suspicion. So we had to begin a process to sort of rebuild that trust. And that's been an ongoing effort that really informs all of our activities. So as a director of our University Research Institute, on the one hand, we see the enormous impact technology is having for our students, our graduates. Of course, that's where economic growth is. That's where the job opportunities lie. As Joe alluded to, right, in computer science and AI, that is where all the the great opportunities are for our students. But at the same time, and Shamara alluded to this, that gap is widening between the haves and have-nots. Right? Those who have access to that economic growth and those who are surrounded by technology, a world that's driven by technology, but don't have the access to whether it's the connections, the devices, or the training to take advantage of that. Right? So we realized early on that we needed to work very, very intentionally to close that gap. So I'm going to give a shout out to Andy Stutzman, who just appeared, who is our Director for Civic Technologies and Digital Equity at the Excite Center. And he has worked on digital equity issues well before the pandemic. But of course, as was mentioned, the pandemic certainly brought things into sharp relief. So in response, because, Philadelphia schools going online for an extended period, he established our Digital Navigators program, which is a help desk. It's a community help desk for internet access issues, finding pathways to get free or subsidized internet, broadband to the home, for technical support, and for access to digital skills training programs that some are hosted at our university and some are hosted throughout the city. Partnered very closely with the city of Philadelphia early on to establish PHL ConnectEd, a broadband access program, so that anyone with a family member whose children are in Philadelphia schools can get free broadband. They are on the ground collecting very low level, house by house, block by block data about broadband access, which is still really a gap in terms of our knowledge about broadband penetration, not just in Philadelphia, but certainly nationwide. And also working to bring access to seniors, right? That seniors who are often disconnected, and especially through the pandemic, have been, lacking access to information about health and connection to families and whatnot. So, and then finally, another big accomplishment, started a computer refurbishing program and has at this point distributed over 300 computers to Philadelphia residents and organizations particularly in West Philadelphia. These are computers that have been either decommissioned by our university or are decommissioned by industry and other large organizations and given to this cause. So that's how we try to connect some of the dots for our students and for our families in the neighborhood.
Thanks so much, Youngmoo. Philadelphia is really important to us at Century Tech Foundation. We spent time on the household internet assessment last year with John Horgan, who I think might be in the audience listening. And the study that John designed, what it did show to us was how acute the gap was for older Philadelphians in the city, and the need for organizations like the Excite Center to do the work that you all are doing. I just want to call out the role of universities and how important that is, to provide the kind of support you're providing, but also as we get more into it, right, like they are backing up the work of Lift New York through that, coaching model, which they've been doing, and it's a career coaching model that now they're embedding digital equity into, but just also, career pathways and making those accessible to folks. So really important how universities are showing up in this context. I have gone rogue, and my team is probably wondering what I'm doing with time, but I really wanted everyone to hear from you all, and I want to do a rapid fire John just pinned the Philadelphia study in the chat. I do want to say we're super proud of having done that work and collaborated together with everyone on that. That study prompted Philadelphia to move to inform its executive order on digital equity. And it also informed its 5-year strategy on digital equity. So we're super proud of that combination of bringing together real data, real experiences of people on the ground with policy, because we know that then makes the work you're doing on the ground possible. But I want to do a rapid fire, and I want to have you all just share, right? Like, we all know that funding resources is core to what we need to achieve, but we're in this moment, right? And sometimes it feels like drinking from a fire hose to try to keep up with what's coming out of the federal government and what you should be doing and where you should be positioning yourselves. Would love to hear from you all, just really quickly, no more than 30 seconds, like what would be most helpful to take your efforts to the next level, like in this environment, with the promise of these billions of dollars, your visions for your organizations for growth and scale. What is it that you most need? Let's just take it as a given, we all need the dollars. But what next is it that you most need to move the work forward? And we'll just start with you, Stephen, and we'll go back around.
Yeah, that's a tough question. I would say that from where we sit, we have started with some pilot projects, and our goal for scaling this work is to document what we are learning in a playbook. And because we're a regional planning organization, and because part of our mission is regional collaboration amongst cities and amongst municipalities, our hope is that we can actually provide some best practices, and actually not only provide best practices, but provide a community of practice for these different communities to learn from each other.
Thanks so much. And I don't know if Tamara is still with us. Tamara, are you there? If not, let's just, oh, there you are. Okay. 30 seconds or less.
Listen, I think it starts with an acknowledgement that this is everyone's issue. I would love for the greater philanthropic community to really see the need for investment in innovation and allowing organizations to embed or integrate digital literacy into their larger portfolios. I think there's a sea change that needs to happen within philanthropy. So more investment.
Thank you. Joe.
Yes. Thank you so much. I got you. 30 seconds. 25 seconds now. 20 seconds. I say, most helpful would probably be partnerships, right? Buyback's been around and we've been at it for 25 years. Our goal is to continue to grow, and we know we have a model that works in several other communities. So we're building this scalable model. So we need more community partners who build community trust on the grounds. We know how to connect people to the internet. We know how to get them the tools and resources that they need. We know how to provide the training that they need in order to use these tools and resources. So less than 20 seconds. That's what we need. Also unrestricted funds, but that's what we need.
Hello. Okay, Janice.
I would say a deeper understanding of and investment in infrastructure and how important that is for communities, especially in terms of ownership of that infrastructure, especially, in places like Detroit where upgrades to at least the internet infrastructure haven't been made for decades. That's something that's just really hard to get, funders to understand, is like the infrastructure is actually a big deal, but relating it to ownership and how important that is for a community.
Yes, thank you. Young Moo.
Two things that I can think of. One is assistance in sort of reaching scale. I mean, there are so many people we connect with. There are so many people who just never hear about it. And or we get from our people who reach out to us, I didn't hear about this until so-and-so told me. So support, I know organizations on this call are doing this, right? Marketing, advertising, even finding how to meet people where they are. And then the second thing I'd point to is we need to develop new curricula and programs that really leapfrog what we have traditionally thought of digital skills, right? Learning Microsoft Office is not enough now, and that might get you in the door. But if you want to participate in the digital future, it has to be much more than that. We've been relying on just sort of industry or just osmosis for people to do that, but we need to specifically connect those dots to real digital skills and training to help people find the jobs where there is growth.
Thank you. You're getting a lot of thumbs up and plus ones. And I know Anita Lee, who's just a rock star in Birmingham, Alabama, is loving this conversation. We'll have to do another event and have Anita up here speaking. Okay, I want to say thank you all. I hope to connect and stay in dialogue with you all. This was not enough time. We could have spent an hour all together, but we do want to give some airtime to your colleagues who are moving this work forward on the ground. So want to invite the program leads from the 5 organizations to come on screen with me. As they're joining us, I can see already into the future that I ate up a lot of our time for what we had planned in the program. So go ahead and come on screen, y'all. And while they are joining us, I just want to say, you know, this work that you're hearing about today would not have been possible without my colleagues at Century Tech Foundation. I want to give a shout out to Laura Francis, who really helped stand up this project and met with all of the teams. And also to Kate Rivera, who has been working with us to execute on this. And then we have a colleague, Kat Trujillo, who is helping behind the scenes today. But here we are, I think we have everyone. Okay, great. So you are all the folks that are in the cohort that have been meeting with us, and you are the ones implementing the work on the ground that Colin is speaking to. And just really want to call out the things that were highlighted in Colin's presentation and just kind of hear the human aspect of it. So I'm going to start here with Sharon from Bite Back. And Sharon, if you could just talk to us about this idea of family digital literacy and just kind of quickly explain how you all arrived at that through your partnership with Martha's Table in Washington, D.C. to be able to provide something for families.
So Martha's Table gave us the idea. This is what they needed, and we ran with it. And this was our first dual generation program, so we learned a whole lot. From my own background in adult literacy, I know that family literacy is a win-win-win. When children watch their parents learn, they want to learn, and what can be a challenging situation becomes family as a team. Everybody's studying, everybody's getting their A+, etc. So I knew that family literacy would be great. Dual Gen allows us to have older adults work with younger adults, and that's where the magic happens. Each side learns from each other, they inspire each other. So we're excited to continue this time of work. And I have to say that our biggest lesson learned was we needed more youth-centric curriculum, and that's what we're now working on. So we thank you, Century Tech, and we loved all these conversations with Colin, because that's really what came out of it. And a lot of wonderful resources were offered from you for us to continue our work. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Sharon. I just want to know, I mean, the 2-gen approach is something which is really catching on all around the country, primarily in the areas of education. And you hear about 2-gen models for schools in K-12, 2-gen models in higher ed for student parents. But there wasn't a lot that we were finding in the area of digital equity. And, you know, folks who know me, I'll get on a soapbox about this, but we put all that focus on K-12 and the homework gap, and unwittingly created yet another gap inside homes. And it was really important for us to be able to think about how is it that we can not do that? How can we make sure that as kids are getting what they need, the adult care providers in the home are also getting what they need, not just to support their children in their learning, but for themselves to be able to advance in their own learning and in their own careers. So really appreciate that you know, effort that Bite Back and Martha's Table have been implementing and continue to learn from, and the importance of the role of listening and engagement with the community to respond to their needs. With, you know, I want to stay here with this focus on the family and go to Pedro Suarez from Lift New York. And Pedro's been leading that work in the Bronx with families, and this, you know, adaptation of your career coaching model to incorporate digital equity, a process you have started before Century Tech Foundation and came to meet with you all. But talk to us about that, and in particular, you know, how maybe this work helped you see a new way to deliver the coaching model, and just share with us what you're observing from the last few months together.
For sure. I mean, I think part of it stems from, you know, Lyft being really committed to living into its values. and doing that in a real way that evolves over time. And so when we talk about our values around relationships and equity, part of that really informed the need to build stronger relationships with the members that we serve, and it takes time to build stronger relationships. And so we recognized, one, that we needed to extend that amount of time that folks get to connect with the coaches that serve in our program. But also from an equity standpoint, paying people for their time. And so incorporating a stipend model with the coaches that are serving in our program through the MSW schools that we partner with. And that also stemmed from feedback directly from our members. Lyft really intentionally surveys its members multiple times throughout the year. And our members had really indicated that their least favorite component of the program was a transition between coaches. And so they really wanted to stay with folks longer and build those relationships and not have to retell their story multiple times. And so we really recognize a need to address that. And our staff, our program staff had also indicated and named that we needed to address it. And so we really made that investment in extending that internship program to 12 months, fostering stronger relationships. But we also hope that it informs a few things. One is higher retention among our members, better data over a longer period of time as to what's working, what's not working, and consistency of service and the quality of the experience. Again, emphasizing quality over quantity, and deepening the impact with the families that we serve, not just the number of families that we serve.
Thank you so much, Pedro. I love that. And, you know, that's what this support was meant to do, was really to help groups just kind of take observations and learnings and innovate and, you know, improve programming. So we're super excited to hear about that. I want to now move to Faye at the Equitable Internet Initiative and, you know, switch the conversation a bit to the role of employers, because, you know, you all are, you're straddling the line there, both as like a community organization that's helping residents connect to greater access and opportunities for adoption, but you also are kind of like quasi-employer, and then you're also engaging with employers to provide opportunities for the people that come through your work. So talk to us about that, you know, the Digital Stewards Program, the pipeline you're building of folks who've been trained to install networks, who are now then becoming instructors to others and who are entering into apprenticeships. We'd love to hear about that.
Absolutely. Thank you all for this really incredible panel. So to elaborate a little bit further on our model, we train Detroiters to design, build, and maintain their network. So our intention is to recruit residents from neighborhoods to then become what we call digital stewards, who are those that build the network and also recruit for the network and essentially steward it over time. So with this Digital Integrators pilot, we were really able to focus on the accessibility of our training to that prepares residents to be able to have the skill set to, you know, go on your roof and install an antenna, to understand where access points should be so that the network can, you know, be robust and have a strong connection. So basically, we needed to direct some resources towards making our curriculum more friendly for the digital scape. As has been mentioned on this panel, you know, 2020 really changed how we teach this type of thought. You know, it was in person for 10 years. Well, we're at the 10th year now. So for like, what, 7 years. And so now, you know, we want to enhance the tools we use to teach online, because the barometer we really have is the easier it is to learn tech, the better path we're on. You know, that's like the North Star, that this shouldn't be complicated and, you know, gate kept. So, you know, that's the first part, really boosting up our curriculum. So we've been able to, you know, focus on developing that curriculum, hiring somebody to have, you know, focused time on this. And then the second piece is creating new opportunities for folks who have been invested in this project. So like I said, it's been around for 10 years and there have been so many people who, you know, either volunteer or we're at the early stages, or, you know, we're an original OG digital steward who are still in the periphery of this project. So with CTF, we've been able to, you know, allocate resources so that we can hire from this community of people to become instructors. So, you know, as we're getting the ball rolling with the curriculum, we want to have more people who can teach this, and people who have, you know, been in this world and in this community. So we're hiring 5 new instructors. And then additionally, we're working with our ISP provider to hire 2 apprentices from this group as well. So to wrap up, this impacts our partners as well, because they are part of the 3 neighborhood networks. We are so all like intimately interconnected. So, you know, the work we do in hiring people from the community and training them also influences how robust their network is, and it meets our common goal of strengthening as a whole. So, you know, that's kind of where we're off, and it's been really wonderful. Thank you all. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Faye, and encourage everybody to check out Digital Stewards. It's such an important model, and great to know how you're innovating it. Andy, I want to hear from you and this experience of what Youngmoo was speaking to, really trying to overcome those town gown barriers and relationships with the community, and how you all are doing that through digital navigators and your first hire of a community resident. And no pressure, and with great apologies, Andy and Will, but I am going to ask you to be brief. Thank you.
Absolutely, yeah. We recently hired our digital navigator, Jalen McGlone, who lives in the community. And it's been great getting him involved with all the different aspects right now of actually doing phone calls, doing outreach events, helping out with some of the digital skills classes. But right now he's also he's kind of co-leading a program to train older adults on how to use tablets, and we're actually providing them the tablets at the end of that. And you know, we wouldn't have gotten Jalen if it hadn't been some of the previous work we had through our Promise Neighborhoods grant. So we've been lucky to have the Department of Education Promise Neighborhoods grant for the last 6 years within our region here. It's called the West Philadelphia Promise Zone. And with that, we've developed all those community programs, partnerships. And also we're very much focused on making sure that money stays in the community and hiring within that community, whether it's our outreach teams, whether it's our communications, you know, folks like administrative team running the grants. So many folks in the region, the area, have been hired to actually help me administer the grant itself. And with that, you know, we made those connections with Jalen as well. And it's just been great. You know, the community knows the community. That's the biggest thing. They know who they're talking to. They know the difficulties people are going through, some of the struggles that are out there, and they know how to work with them. And yeah, so we're really happy to have Jalen with us, and hoping to see where that goes in the future as we are trying to develop more funds to hire more people directly from the neighborhood as well.
Thanks so much, Andy. I love that, and I love the idea of, you know, making sure that public investments stay in the community. That's really just wonderful. Will, talk to us about the Metropolitan Area Planning Council and how you all are coming at this work as an entity that's not a direct service provider.
Sure. Thanks, Marta. Yeah, as my colleague Stephen mentioned earlier, I think that we take a regional approach to these things. We approach digital equity planning and broadband access planning in much the same way that we might approach housing planning or transportation planning. But I think to echo what some of the other folks on this panel have shared, you know, we can lead a procurement for a broadband network at a housing authority site in the same way that our analytics department might do a housing study, or our municipal collaboration department might help a town buy a fire truck. What we can't do alone is that community engagement. That has to be in partnership with the community and taking the lead of the community to make sure that sort of the rest of digital equity that isn't wrapped up in just purchasing a broadband network for people to access is actually being led by the community in a way that is appropriate to them, relevant to them, in the correct language, and culturally competent for them. That is where we really have to build those partnerships rather than come in as sort of a technical advisor or service provider.
Thank you so much. And it's so evident in the work. And I mean, I just continue to be really in awe of how those housing authorities are working together and, you know, how they recognize the value of your partnership, but also the local community-based organizations, because it is such a diverse community, and how to get this into housing is not easy. And so really appreciate that. Want to thank you all for your time here today, and not just your time today, but for what you're doing on the ground and for joining us to share this. I'm going to ask my team to let's just allow our panelists to go off camera, and we'll close out the event. Magically, we are at time. And thank you. Thanks to all who joined. Thanks to all who stayed through the conversation. This has been really wonderful. It's just, you know, we're just scratching the surface. As Colin said, there will be a report that gets published this fall, late October, early November. Please look out for that. We are happy to share more with people. As I said, the recording will be shared. The deck can be shared. I'm available to talk with you all. Our partners, I'm sure, would welcome conversations. I want to just take a note to also acknowledge like the funding support that Century Tech Foundation has for this work from Morgan Stanley and also from Verizon. We're very grateful to them to be able to extend these opportunities. These groups, because of our support, have been able to invest in work that otherwise they would not have been able to do. They are innovating in the delivery of their programs. They're evolving in their understanding of digital equity, and they are teaching us as an organization that wants to do more to extend access and adoption to communities. We want to break through barriers to figure out how to bring more people into these experiences and really move to that idea of a shared prosperity and an inclusive digital economy. Thank you all for joining us. We really do appreciate you, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. It's been a pleasure to share this time with you. Take care.